Okay, hi everybody. I think we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to start this session now. So my name is Jason Saul. I'm the global manager for K-12 for Esri, and you've got my colleague Carly Donier in here, and also Laura Bowden. If any of you are on Twitter, please feel free to tweet out about the session. So you can find me at GIS for Schools. So I'm tweeting pretty much about GIS for Schools on that, and you can see Carly's Twitter feed as well, Carly_Donier. So please feel free to tweet out any good, bad, indifferent things you like about or don't like about the session. But I hope you'll like it because I've had a lot of fun actually putting this together. I'm based in the UK, as you may be able to tell from my accent, and so I'm going to be showing you some examples today of some virtual teaching resources based in the UK. But what I really want to get to is creating a framework and really creating a conversation really about how do we take all this really great content we've seen. I was just looking at Joseph Kursky's talk recently in the previous talk about data. We've got so much information, so much great content we have. How do we put this all together into resources and teaching resources that are really valuable and useful in there? Can we start to create some sort of framework and methodology for that? And I saw some work yesterday from Aaron Liu in Hong Kong and Brett Dascombe in Australia doing this work. So we know there's work going on in here. And I just want to share some of the ideas and things I've been thinking about and working on with some schools in the UK, and just generally thinking about a framework that we might want to put together. And when we talk about creating a virtual resource, this is what I'm really thinking about. I'm particularly thinking about using Storymaps. Storymaps as a container and a delivery mechanism for our geospatial content. I really like the new StoryMap framework in there. They work across all types of different devices. You know, I find it really easy, and I've seen students, other teachers making and creating resources, and it seems to be working. I like it a lot in here. And so what I'm really thinking about with these story maps is how do we take things like 3D maps and 2D maps and videos and imagery and push them in together into a story map, and then also maybe a new concept you may not have heard of is a story map collection in here. And for me, the story map collection is a way of actually maybe reducing the sort of cognitive load of some of these resources. There's a lot of new information coming in, and we can use a story map collection to theme single story maps into nice, easily understandable, easily digestible pieces of content. And I'm going to show you an example of that in there. But where and how might these types of resources be useful? So before we actually go and see something, so I'm just been thinking about where these could be used in an education context. And please feel free to type into the chat if you've got some other ideas where they can be used as well. You know, this is all about collaboration and sharing ideas at the moment. So for me, particularly, it's been difficult getting out and about into different places. But if you have been able to, or we're going to start to be able to get out to new fieldwork locations, these resources can be a great primer for actually before you go to a place, familiarising the students with actually where they're going to be, what they're going to do, where they're going to collect data. Talking to my colleague Katie Hall, saying students who have an idea of where they're going to go when they go to a fieldwork location, they were better behaved. They weren't so overexcited going to this brand new location there. So crowd control, maximising your time out in the field was a real bonus in there. Also, when you come back from a field trip, do the students remember where they went, what they did, why they went there? So these sort of resources can serve as a nice reminder of actually where the students went, what they did, contextualise the data they collected, and hopefully sort of check for some understanding of actually the field work they actually learned something. It meant something to them in there. Some more actual applications of these types of resources in there. Literally, there's that virtual place, a distant place, maybe around the other side of the world that you're just not going to be able to get to. So can you use these as a case study for these places? Also really importantly, not everybody can go in the field. Whether there's physical, financial, cultural reasons why people can't go to the field, can we create a next best thing? Can we create an experience for them that actually has some meaning in there? I think we're never going to replace going to the field. I think everyone on this call has had, sort of maybe life-changing experiences out in the field, really that epiphany moment where you actually all your subject knowledge comes together in that experience out in the field. And I don't think we're ever going to replace that, but we can create something really good and helpful. And again, I think these things can be just a general front of class teaching resource. Some of the examples I'm going to show you today are really driven by also by our exam boards. Our exam boards are specifying or mentioning certain locations in there, and those are becoming sort of the standard things that every teacher is using. So maybe that's why we want to go and create these things. So enough words, enough text. Why don't we have a demo of actually what I'm talking about? I want to talk you through some of the things I've been doing and thinking about using Storymaps and Storymaps collections as a way to bring together these resources and create a virtual experience of somewhere. Okay, so I'm in my Storymaps account in here, and if you've not seen Storymaps before, I can have individual stories, but I'm in my collection section now, and if I click on my collection, I've now got grouped together a themed selection of story maps. Also, another great thing about collections is actually I can include other things other than story maps in here. So I could have a PowerPoint, PDF, a video, an app, like a dashboard. They can all be in my collection as well. So a collection for me, we can take a particular subject and we can break it down and we can put this together in a nice compact way that you can share with students or your colleagues really, really easily in here. And it may be, maybe this is week 1 as a lesson, it's week 2 and so on. So it's a nice way of actually just presenting this information. So just reading on the question in there, are these resources free? For K-12, everything I'm going to show you today is completely and utterly free. In here, there's some other licensing for universities in that, but we can come to that later on. So everything I'm going to show you today is free, and also going to give you all these resources to look at as well. So let's get started. So here's my first Exploring River Tees story map. If you've used Storymaps before, you'll recognize the familiar sort of content layout. I'm just going to zoom into here. And this is where we start to get, for me, some of the nuts and bolts of actually how this works and why it works really, really quite nicely. So what you can see on the screen here inside a story map is actually called a sidecar. It's a sidecar block inside a story map. And it allows me to, I've added in, this happens to be a 3D map. I recognize the UK in here. So I've got full control over my map inside here. And I've got these buttons on the left-hand side that I've created. And for me, this is probably an underused aspect of story maps. It's something called a map action. And map actions allow you to actually control the narrative of the story. So my setup here is actually, I want to familiarize my students with the River Tees and its catchment. So don't get bogged down in actually, oh, it's the river. I don't do the River Tees. Think about during this session, how can I take these ideas and apply it to my river, my catchment, my coast, my lakes, or whatever things you're teaching about. Think about that type of application. So map actions allow me, if I click on this, I can control the map and where we actually want the students to go to. I can also control what data comes on at a particular time. We've got text inside here. And we can start to build that story up. So we've had the main river, now we've got the different water courses and the streams and tributaries that run into it. I can also then change the view. And I can turn on and off other pieces of data. So here's the geology. So if you've used the 3D map viewer, this is just, there's nothing special about it. It's just a 3D map that we've created in there. We'll come and look at that a bit later on in here. So very easily, we can start to walk the students through about actually where the river is, its characteristics, and we might want to move up onto look at, say, maybe the upper course. You can see the layers, the geology layers turned off in here. So now we're looking at the upper course of the river, and there's a nice little video about this area.
Like most rivers in Britain, the Tees starts off in one of the most desolate environments in the country.
Now, you may have some of your own videos from your own fieldwork locations. Maybe you want to use those inside here. But what we can start to do is actually give the students a view looking from source to mouth. From one of these pop-ups. I'm just going to dock this image on the side. And so now we can see, here's a picture from the mouth, from the source, to the mouth, looking down, and here's that virtual piece as well. So maybe if you're actually going to be going to this fieldwork location, maybe you're just giving the students an idea of what it's going to be like, what clothes they need to wear, and so on. So we can start to just move along the river course and start to pick out some of the interesting geographical features we want to look at. So here we've got Calgreen Dam. And this mixture between the actual photograph itself and that virtual 3D environment created by ArcGIS, the scene viewer, essentially. We can move across. Other really interesting features in here. So there's actually a gorge and a waterfall along this river. This is one of the reasons why it's picked by an exam board. It's got lots of interesting features all the way along here. As I scroll down, we can move to the middle course. Now imagine this as a scenario. This may be a resource you want to give to the students just to actually look at before maybe they go on a field trip. Maybe you're at the front of class. And you're teaching on a whiteboard, and you're stepping through and describing the characteristics of the river. So it's map actions, and we're going to look at map actions in a bit more detail later on. The idea of actually you can really control how you move through the map. You have control of the narrative through this map action in here. Let's go down a bit more, and we can go down to the meanders and right to the mouth of the river. So we can give the students a virtual experience of this river catchment, right from its source, right the way down to its mouth, and even bringing in other data like things like flooding information. To start to really explore the characteristics of this particular type of this river and its catchment in there. So that was the first example of just actually using and structuring the data using map actions inside a story map. And this is just a standard 3D view inside ArcGIS Online. And we'll come back and look at these sort of the skills and knowledge you might need to create one of these. So I was going to, because I'm inside my story map collection, I can just move directly to the next story map. So we'll click on here. So now we've got the same catchment, but now I'm interested in the human impacts on the River Tees in here. So same format, I can scroll down so it's familiar to the students. So we can actually orientate them again. But this time I'm going to bring in data that is actually from the Living Atlas that I added into my 3D layer. So if I click on land use and then catchment, I've embedded a little video here to show you actually, if the student's not quite sure, they can actually work out how to turn the key on, or the legend in here. And again, this idea, we can just actually think about what story do we want to tell, what do we want the students to learn, how do we actually walk them through this. And this time I've just included some questions inside the story map. How does land use affect the river and the waterways? We can still zoom into the map. We can click on the map. And we still have that full control over that as if you would do using the standard 3D map viewer. And again, we can start to walk through these questions. Again, maybe it's the front of class, or maybe it's actually some homework and the students have to write up some answers to this. Other information we can start to bring into here, again, more Living Atlas data. I found this really quite interesting, actually putting this resource together. If you think about rivers as being the way that the oceans and seas interact with the land, they're almost like fingers going into the land. And I was really surprised to see how many these dots on this map all represent different types of licensed discharges into the river, where it's legal to dump wastewater and other materials into the river. You know, and we think that river all flows out into the sea. So maybe if we're thinking about an oceans, or in the news at the moment, microplastics or plastic pollution in here, maybe it's an interesting way of actually presenting that information and how what we do on the land and what we do with our rivers, how it actually eventually ends up in the sea. And particularly on this particular area here, some more data from the Living Atlas you're going to see now is this time some 3D data. This 3D data represents the amount of times storm surges have forced raw sewage out of the sewage works into the river channel. So this data is often sort of hidden away and not easy to access. But now, a bit of a 3D cartography in the map viewer. So if you're familiar with the cartography inside either the 2D viewer or the 3D map viewer, it's something called smart mapping. This is really simple to do, just using the attributes to extrude the points up in there just to show where these discharges are happening in there. And again, really trying to start a conversation with the students about the river that maybe they live in the area, and what do they think about having all these different types of discharges and events happening in their local area. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it, it's a conversation piece that you can present to them around that. And again, just really easily, there were some recent news articles about microplastics and river pollution and this type of thing. So you can link in other materials into these story maps in there. So a nice way of maybe introducing like questions or questioning and presenting some complex data, but maybe some interesting ways about and using that sort of this virtual aspect of it in 3D. So the next thing that I'd like to show you on here is actually how we can use these 3D virtual environments to collect data, and again give the students another experience of these sort of physical environments in here. So I'm going to go and click on here again and move to my next story map. So virtual data collection and interpreting physical features using these types of environments. Now, this time I've changed the way we might want to assess this, deliberately in here. So beforehand we were just looking at it and at the first one and walking through. The second one we were actually asking questions inside the story map. And this time I'll change it slightly. So if you're a school that's a Google Classroom or you're a Microsoft school, what you can do, you can embed, this is created in Microsoft Forms. So I could either just click on here, and now I've got my assessment form already created inside Microsoft Forms. I can then save that back into my probably my Teams environment for my school, or if it's a Google Docs, I can do exactly the same thing. So your assessment piece can be embedded inside the story map. So it fits in with your current way of working. If I was to scroll down to this here, you'll see this is slightly different. Now, in this instance, I can't use the sidecar app, because what I want to do, I want to use some of the tools inside the map viewer. At the moment, things like the measure tool and the profile tool are not inside the sidecar app in there, but hopefully that will come sometime soon. But so what I've done now this time, instead of the sidecar, I've actually embedded the whole 3D map viewer inside the story map, and I can control very similar ways to the map actions. I can just use these slides that I've created at the bottom here, so I can zoom into my map. Now this river we've got here, so I've used the analysis tools in the 2D map, in the Map Viewer Classic. I've used the trace downstream tool just to give me a point from the source all the way to the mouth. And if I was to go and click on the Analyze tool, now a new tool added to 3D was the Profile tool. I think it was maybe the last version of release of ArcGIS Online. And if I click on Select Line and click on the map, or click on the line, what it will do is give me a long profile of that river. Again, understanding the characteristics of that river. There's a higher ground and falling down into the sea below level there. So a nice way of just being able to extract some really interesting information and some basic information about the course of a river in here. Now I could zoom back into the upper course again. I'll select my line again. This time the profile tool gives me a really nice V-shape, really characteristic of upper course of a river. And this is where maybe I have to get my students, they would actually look at this, they have to interpret what this is and write an explanation for that inside the assessment piece, inside either the Google Doc or inside the form. And so, and on we go. So if we come down to, remember last time we talked about this gorge. Click on this line. Oh, select the line again, and now we can see the shape of that gorge in there. So again, getting the students to think about that, explaining what it is. I've still got control over that map, and I can also go and do some freeform profiles, isn't it? Create a new profile. Maybe I'll come across the river. And now I've got a profile across the river there, as well as we can have the profile over the gorge as well. So getting the students to really investigate these physical environments. If you can't go there, or maybe again, is that primer before you go, so they know what to expect when they get to these places. Now I'm just going to move out slightly from the River Tees example just for a second, because I just want to take you into slightly south of the River Tees, and so I think this is another important use of this type of technology. And so we're just coming a bit further south. This is the North Sea in here, and you've got Netherlands over to this side here. And so, as a geographer, or looking at this landscape, this coastal the coastline here, I can see there's a headland here, and I can see there's a depositional spit at the bottom here. So if we were to ask the students which way do we think longshore drift is moving in here, here's a depositional landform. So we would probably assume it's moving from, as far as the map's concerned, north to south across that slope, across that coastline. But can we actually use this map to actually go and get any other, maybe collect some primary data or collect some other information that might confirm our hypothesis that that's the way the longshore drift is going? So if I was to zoom in, and again, this is where you have to think about your locations. Where would this type of activity work for your locations in there? So we can see we see an erosional line here. We can see some groins and some rock armor. Maybe you just want the students to, do they recognize you've got these sort of stable slopes of grass growing on them, and then these unstable slopes with slumping in here, an erosion line, mainly due to, or all due to the rock armor that's been, the sea defenses inside there. If we come back to our idea of actually, can we work out from this sort of scale which way longshore drift is going? If I use my measure tool again, instead of the profile, I'm going to use the actual distance measure tool. And for one click and click over the groin, I can see there's a gap. So this side of the groin is over 2 meters lower than this side of the groin. So in terms of understanding longshore drift, we've got deposition on this side and erosion on this side. If we were to come out to collecting that data, would really confirm our original thought that actually longshore drift is actually happening along this in these directions along the coastline in there. So just ways of actually using these three-dimensional environments to actually go and collect some primary data for the students. So let's go back to the slides for a second. So just some reflections on that. It seems like maybe quite complex processes all put together to try and create these resources, but we're going to deconstruct that in a second in there. But I think there's a process and a pedagogy to work out actually what would be the best way to actually present this information. And again, everyone thinking about their own environments, their own places, where could they do this type of work? Would it work for them? How would you structure your narrative in there? Where would you start? What do you want the students to learn? And you may have lots of interesting resources already about these fieldwork locations, and could you augment it by adding it into this type of resource in there? So let's think about the resource that I just showed you, that on the River Tees, and thinking about how you might go about constructing it. So if we just were to deconstruct it, the vast majority of the data and the maps we'll put together using the 2D map. So if you're familiar with ArcGIS Online, you would probably use either the classic or the new map viewer. There's also just the 3D maps in there. There's nothing special about it. It's just a standard 3D map viewer. And I'm just doing things like I'm creating slides inside the 3D map viewer. I'm changing the cartography with smart mapping. And a similar sort of thing with the 2D maps. I'm also using the 2D maps as really as my analysis toolbox. So I can go and create things like the watershed from there. I can go and create use the trace downstream tool to create a river for me in there. And if you're, again, the assessment piece for me, it's probably one of our weakest pieces across actually GIS. How do you assess what we're doing in here? But maybe integrating these resources inside the Microsoft environments or Google environments can help ease that aspect of actually making assessments work for us and making your life easier by making the assessment piece flow into your existing working environment. And so we've got from here these individual maps or story maps. these individual 3D maps or 2D maps, just really simply just adding them into a story map in here. And the map actions piece, we're going to have a little look at that in a second. That's the key for me, is controlling that narrative. And then going into that sort of that virtual collection, that story map collection in here. So this is sort of breaking the whole resource down in here. And so if you're thinking about, this maybe looks quite complicated. Well, for me, almost like the best way to eat an elephant is one piece at a time. So maybe you don't do the whole thing in here. Maybe you're just going to go and do a 2D map or a 3D map, and maybe one story map. And that's how you start off in here. So don't get overwhelmed by the fact that there's a huge lots of work in there. Just think about, actually, what can I do just to try this out? What can I do to actually just get going and start some work on this? Or maybe thinking this and thinking, actually, I've not done much in 3D. Maybe I need to improve my skills and knowledge about 3D. I'm going to go and focus on that. Or maybe I haven't done much on story maps. I'm going to go and try that out. So just using this as a way to think out what do I need to work on? What can I do now? And maybe in terms of some sort of professional development, can I focus on as well? The map action. Let's go and have a look at what the actual map action is. So another quick demonstration of that. Going to go into my story maps. So I'm going to create a new story map. I can start from scratch, or we mentioned the sidecar previously. I'm going to go and create a sidecar story map straight away. Yeah, I'm not going to waste some time putting the title in an image and things like we normally suggest with a story map. So here's my sidecar already set for me. I'm going to add some media, and I'm going to add a map. And it doesn't differentiate between 3D maps and 2D maps. They're all in here. I'm going to choose one of my maps. It adds it for me. Here's all the layers that I've got included in that particular 3D map. Here are the slides or the bookmarks that I've got saved in that map as well. And I've got some options for turning some tools on. So I maybe want to turn the legend on. Now, what I'd like to see is actually another little tick here that I can turn on the measure tool as well. So we can do the profile and the measuring analysis inside here. Hopefully that will come. Well, I can click on, say, place scene. And that adds that map for me into my sidecar. And this is the clever bit. When I come over to my left-hand side on my sidecar, I click on the plus button. On the media, now this is usually grayed out, but in the sidecar, map action. I click on here. Maybe I'll type in this is my location 1, and click on the edit button. So I can get that right. I can turn on layers off and layers on and off as I want to. When I've got that in the right place, and my map, here we go. Save action. Save my action. And now I have a button that allows me to go down to that particular place. So I can control layers and location and the view about everything that I want to do just doing that map action in there. So I'm not going to go and do any more than that because time's getting on. We get the idea of it. So you can control where you want students to go to very, very precisely and what data you want them to see. And you can ask them particular questions at that particular location. I think it's really important. So let's get back to the slides. This is where probably I've had the most fun putting some of these sessions together. We've been really thinking about experimenting with other technology like drone data, and more recently with an iPad Pro. The iPad Pro has actually got a LiDAR scanner on the front, which means we can go out and scan things in 3 dimensions. Which is it's quite phenomenal actually in that. And so the You can also go out and fly drones, or work with maybe some other people who have got licenses to fly drones and collect their data and create 3D models that are really high resolution. That actually, I think, make quite a difference to how students might perceive a place, and also really improving the resolution of the data we'd have as standard out of ArcGIS Online. So let's go and have a look at a quick demo of that. There. Not that one. Support. So I'm going to give you this story map at the end of the session, by the way. So I've just added some of these experiences just to give you an idea of actually where we might go. Is this the next level of actually our work in creating these resources? So the first version I'm going to show you is created with some drone data. Now, drone to map is part of the schools package, part of the advanced schools package. All schools get access to drone to map, and this was processed using drone to map. So, and we work with in collaboration with just a local startup company in the area, the Southwest Drones, who went and flew some data for us. A really nice collaboration in there. So we're going to work in this sort of southwest part of the UK in here. So I'm just going to give you an example in here, and let's go and look at maybe some standard type data that you'd expect that we can see inside. It's pretty good. I do like it. We've got the slumping in here. We see, again, rock armor. We can see sort of sediment transport in here. But let's just move down the coast to actually what the drone data looks like. It's a completely different level of detail in here, and that's almost photorealistic experience in here. And we can embed other content inside here, so we can embed other material. Let's do pictures, so that maybe you're doing some shoreline ecology and things like this. So you can overlay other information on top of your drone information. And for me, it really brings it alive. It makes it, particularly if students can't go to these places for whatever reason, maybe this is the way of really sort of almost sort of photorealistic experiences, and you can start to think of types of weathering and erosion, the different bedding planes and things like that are happening there. Now, the second piece, which was the most exciting for me, literally, because I went and did this. I live quite close to the coast in the UK, so it's going to zoom into where I'm talking from today. So we've got the southeast of England in here, and this little bit of coastline here. So maybe you're teaching things like geology and other types of earth science information inside here, and I'm just living just up in the North Downs up here. So if we were to go to this location again, we'll get our sort of standard map. You can see there's lots in the back here. There's lots of chalk. So we're probably 2 or 3 miles from Dover, with the White Cliffs of Dover. You've probably heard of that, hopefully. And we can see these this succession in here. But if we were to zoom down into what we've got here, this was captured using this iPad. Went down at low tide, and we've got these exposures of Cretaceous galt clay and lower sandstone. We're dipping under the beach and under the Cretaceous chalk in here. It's really difficult to actually get access and to see this information. And if we zoom out, you can see we can just start to see some of this information, or the bedding planes, in the coarser aerial imagery. But this took me about half an hour to scan. No, sorry, 15 minutes, and that includes processing it as well. And I was really quite impressed with actually that level of detail. One thing that was interesting when I was scanning this information, when I actually overlaid the data for using ArcGIS Pro to actually georeference it, the 2019 data shows this area with a tide in, which is a bit irritating, I must admit, when I first did this. But I went back to our app called, you may have not heard of it, it's called Wayback Imagery. And that allowed me to go back to 2014, when, lucky for me, the image was taken with the tide out. Otherwise, my rocks would have been floating in the English Channel. So drones, iPad scanners. It also works on iPad, also on iPhone 12 Pro as well, if you've got that as well. So some really interesting ways to maybe using this new technology to create these really photorealistic, high fidelity examples of fieldwork locations. So let's just jump back to the slides. We'll get into us towards the end here so we can answer any questions. And I think what we've seen today, particularly with some of the high fidelity work, it could potentially be a lot of work for if every single school is going to go and do this. But does every single school need to do it? Can we not be smart about this and collaborate creatively around this? I know, particularly say for River Tees, lots and lots of schools go to River Tees or use it as a case study. So can we collaborate with different schools there and maybe work together? Maybe some schools have got a drone or an iPad. Maybe some others got some other skills to actually go and produce some of these materials in here, or even between universities and schools as well. I think for universities, there's potential for just simple outreach in terms of maybe giving younger students about what a life at university might be like, or involvement in real life research projects, or even actually this whole activity, actually a research activity. I think it's quite novel. It could be something you want to bid some money for and work with some local schools to go and try these types of technologies out. So a number of ways that could work. Come and talk to us. I'm really interested in this particular way of approaching education in here. So just bouncing ideas off, sharing ideas, collaborating, supporting you with how you might want to go and approach certain things, and also then promoting your work. Maybe the EduC we've got here, we've got the UC as well. So we're really interested in this type of activity. And I said before that, the geospatial industry, there must be companies maybe companies in your areas or startups who are doing drone imagery. Go and talk to them. Maybe there's an opportunity for them to talk about careers at your school and also maybe share some data as well. So we've been talking a lot to these other small companies that are doing this type of work and saying, maybe have you been to an area of interest? Could you share some data? Would you fly some data for us? Come to our school and talk about careers in there. So there's a bit of quid pro quo and something for everybody in that. So that's not quite a whistle-stop tour through this thing, but the whole idea of actually how do we use ArcGIS to bring in all these different pieces of different data and make all the best information that we possibly have to create a virtual experience that gives the children and the students a real sense of place and location if they can't go there themselves, or actually to prime them and maybe improve the experience of going there through this type of technology. So I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed making this, and hopefully we've got some time for some questions. If there are any questions, Kylie and Laura.
That was awesome, Jason. Thanks. So there are definitely a couple questions coming in here when we got into the demo part where you were showing all these awesome tools and how you put them all together. So let's start with some of those. Bill was asking if he gets an iPad Pro or iPhone 12 Pro with LiDAR and takes a picture of a mountain with trees. Can the iPad strip off the trees to reveal the underlying geology?
No, but unless you actually take the image. So you start to say that you can export the information as a LAS file, so you get as a point file. So then you could probably take it into Pro and try some work on that. Again, I think this is all fairly new. Try it out. Would be my a suggestion. When I tried this, what I was trying to get was something photorealistic. I could actually export all the LAS and the point file in now. So it may be that we can. There's some processing you can do with Pro, but I've not done that yet.
Great. Another one from Luke is, how did you georeference the LiDAR imagery?
So the georeference it's not exact. So I used an app called 3D Scanner, which I think someone might have put in the Luke put that in there. And you can export with GPS coordinates, but essentially there's probably a better way. But the way we did it was we exported it as an object, or it was a DAE file. You can bring that into Pro, and I will post something or I will add something to the story map that I'm going to give you later on. Just the flow of what we did. We then added it into ArcGIS Pro. It puts it at 0, 0. And we gave it a projection, and then I actually physically moved the object and rotated it and got it into pretty much the place that I wanted it, in line with the bedding planes, and that was it. So it was, once we worked out the process, it was fairly straightforward. But you do need to use Pro. So the high fidelity stuff, you're using drone to map or you're using Pro. So it's probably the step up in skills that's a step up essentially. So I will put the process we used into the story map for you to look at.
Great. And with that, can you please include a link for that app? Some people are saying they're finding a number of 3D scanner apps and would like to see which one it was you used.
Yeah, I've already done that. So in the story map, let me,
Perfect.
if I get out of that, I can, yeah.
Great. And I think that answered some of the other questions about the apps used and the formats of data displays. And someone else, Cynthia, was asking, do you need an additional GPS unit for your iPad Pro if you're in a remote area where remote is out of view of GPS satellites and out of wireless range?
Yeah, again, because of the resolution is so good on the scan for the iPad in there, and our relatively our aerial photography is a lot coarser than that. What I was doing is getting it good enough in there, so the model itself was coming in at 0, just off the coast of Africa, and so then I was just actually then physically moving to the location where I knew I'd taken the scan. So if it's not collecting location data in the field, I'm not sure it matters too much, because you're still going to be left with the actual object itself, and you can move into the right place. And again, if you look at looking at the background of what we're against, it's good enough. That's what I was working towards. Is it good enough, essentially, rather than getting too bogged down? It's exactly in the right place. You may need to do that, but for the reasons I would be wanting to teach about here, particularly, about the older beds dipping under the chalk, this works fine.
Great. And then Bill is wondering if there's a sense of how much industry drone data is proprietary.
Probably all of it. Go and speak to them nicely. That's what we've done. And most people in the drone companies we've spoken to are just keen. They've been to school, or they've got kids at school, or they know kids at school. They want to do something good, and so people are taking that on and share data. Not everything, because sometimes they've done things under contract which they can't share. But go and ask. Say, come and work with us. Will you collaborate with us? Will you? They can only say no.
Great. And then there's a lot of other comments in the chat, most of them saying great presentation and interesting, and my head's swimming and I have wonderful things to go try out. So great job.
Excellent.
And thanks for sharing all of this. We have a couple minutes left. If there are any last questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll share those over.
Sorry, Sally. I think I've just sent you about 10 versions of the link. I was trying to send to everybody. Sorry. There you go. That's what. So the link
we put it in a few times throughout. So
okay, that's cool. Yeah. So yeah. And you'll see.
And contact information for Jason at Twitter at GIS for Schools. And then did you have your email on one of those slides as well that you could bring back up?
Yeah. So
there
what I'll also do, I'm going to add this PowerPoint to the StoryMap as well. So it'll be part of that StoryMap collection. So when we finish this session, I will go and add this PowerPoint to the StoryMap collection as well. So all the information's in one place.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for attending. And Jason, that was awesome. Thanks so much for sharing all of that with us. Yeah,
thanks everybody. Let's keep thinking, collaborating, thinking about the pedagogy behind this. What I've been really thinking about is this tech for tech's sake? Let's not fall into that trap. Let's make sure we get it right, and the pedagogy is driving actually, and the learning is driving what we want to do with this. So thanks everybody.